8th Annual Startup Boston Week. I'm Harish and your host for today. A huge thank you first to Suffolk University's Sawyer School of Business for hosting us for the second consecutive year. As you may have noticed, Suffolk University's downtown location is the perfect hub for exploring Boston's innovation ecosystem and learning from industry leaders. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the greater Boston and New England startup community across all departments, all industries, and all funding stages for 5 days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston is primarily volunteer, and all the folks running the conference today, including myself, are also volunteering our time. So thank you for attending this conference, and it is a labor of love. So we appreciate you playing a role in shaping the startup community. Thank you so much once again for being here, and I will pass it on to the speakers for the session.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zarina Javed. This is Nami Oberst. And we're going to talk about ethics and AI and navigating the moral landscape. If it's helpful to just give you some background on each of us. I'm currently at a small AI startup. I'm in charge of legal and operations there. Can't say a lot about what we're doing. We're planning an announcement in the next couple of weeks, but it's unusual to have a lawyer on staff so early at a startup, but with all of the data and all of the laws to navigate, it was important for us to get off on the right foot. And then I'll let Nami introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Nami Oberst. I'm the founder of a startup called AI Blocks. We're the makers of LLMware. It's an open source project that specializes in working with small language models for AI agent deployment and also retrieval augmented generation workflows. And we're really pioneers in this space, having worked with small language models from well over a year ago. So we're also going to be launching our commercial project very soon to be announced shortly. But really thrilled to be here today to discuss ethics and AI.
Awesome. So I'm just going to dive into our first topic, which I think we'll be close to because it's about LLMs. I think we've all seen how easy it is to manipulate LLMs in different ways, whether it's through chatbots or through falsifying the data that's fed into it. What do you think about that? Do you think that's just a risk we have to take? Do you think that the makers of the larger LLMs have a responsibility to harden them against manipulation? Any thoughts?
Well, first of all, we don't have we have a nice audience here, but let's just do a quick poll. Have you had instances where you've interacted with a chatbot and you feel like you've gotten wrong information? Yeah. You see, that's, I think, well over half the folks here. So I think that's a really good baseline to start. So when we talk about LLMs and hallucinations or wrong information, we have to take a step back and really think about how these LLMs operate. So very simply put, contrary to what some people have you believe, they don't have any consciousness, they're not coming for us. I do not believe that, okay? So I'm sorry if they're deep believers of AGI out there, it's not happening. There's statistics at play, tremendous amounts of statistics, but just numbers, math, algorithms. So they're not really coming for you. So when it's giving you wrong information, it's taking a lot of just words that it's seeing, based on its training pattern, and now more increasingly, those words and statistical patterns combined with increasingly what it's finding on the internet and just fusing it all together. And then on top of that, if you're using a really large language model with a large context window, it's also saving a lot of your previous queries. So it's now fusing in some of the internet, it's training, and also what you've put into there. So some of that, so if you just fuse it all together, it's kind of no wonder that it's gonna just give you some garbled response, but do it so convincingly that, when you read it, it sounds like this incredibly knowledgeable bot, right? So to some extent, how can we hold the LLM responsible? We can put guardrails on the way that, the information is retrieved and displayed. But if you just take it as a given that it's just statistics at play, what is the responsibility of this bot at some point? I feel shouldn't we as consumers understand the limitations of these bots or LLMs and use it wisely? So that's one of my takes on it. But I'm also a lawyer, so I can argue both sides.
Yeah, my question on that would be, yes, I think maybe the duty is to educate consumers to understand the differences, although even with like image manipulation, it's very difficult for people to tell, especially as the technology gets better. But then you factor in like children or adolescents that are also using them, and then how can they be expected to know when adults, like educated adults, can't tell all the time?
No, I think these are all amazing, interesting, ethical questions. So, we have, for instance, like websites that say, if you're under a certain age, you shouldn't access this technology, and maybe we should have guardrails and safeguards. Maybe that's age restricted, number one. And then number two, I think there are lawmakers who are trying to address that question. For instance, in California, they have a bill that's currently on the governor's desk, SB 1047, that talks about liability for frontier model makers. So if you're a model maker and you've spent, your model required over like $100 million in training, or you've spent over $10 million to fine tune it, then you could be civilly liable. Like, so if it causes like some kind of some threat or some damage, resulting in a lot of harm. So there are some attempts to put guardrails around that, but it's an evolving technology. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about the California law, because I think that's a good tie-in to a lot of these issues. I think we saw, like, back when Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress, that the lawmakers do not necessarily have like the most robust understanding of the technology that they're trying to legislate. So, are we just setting ourselves up for unintended, like ludicrous results? Like some of, there's wiretapping laws from the 70s that are now being applied to chatbots or being applied to websites and session replay technology. Where do we find the balance? Do we self-regulate? Can we be trusted to do that? What do you think?
I'm actually curious about what the audience thinks. Like, what do
I
you
would love
think?
to know.
Yeah, really. Do you think that AI should be regulated? Who thinks AI should be regulated? Wow, hardly anyone. Okay, a few folks. If there's a mic, like I'd like to hear just
I would love
yeah.
to.
Like, in what way do you think it should be regulated? I think you're right next to the gentleman with the glasses there.
Oh, thanks. For example, high school and college instructors who are giving assignments and then can't discern whether what they're getting is AI authored or not. Now, if an expert, or more or less, can't determine that, I mean, how could a parent, for example, might be reviewing their kids' homework from time to time, at least at the high school level? So I think there needs to be some sort of regulation there. Perhaps a watermark type thing that the software would identify the product with, so you could trace it back to authorship if it had an AI component.
Almost like a plagiarism guard, if you really think about it. Is that what you're referring to?
Almost like what?
Plagiarism guard, if you really think about it, right? That's how you would, right? If there are software that checks against plagiarism.
It's not authentic.
Authentic because you didn't write it,
Correct.
right? So like a plagiarism guard, yeah.
We do have, I think more and more schools are putting in place AI detection software that
Yeah.
things have to be run through, especially now that they're,
Yeah, it hasn't.
for sure.
Agreed. Yeah. Oh,
Respond to that just real quick. There are watermarks already existing. The reason that they weren't put in place is because they would do, like, for instance, OpenAI can only text if ChatGPT text is detected as used. But when they fronted it to their customers and like say, hey, would this be something you'd be interested in, they would lose a third of their clients. That said, yeah, there should be some regulations to some extent, but it also is like a lot of the things, the way that we're used to doing things needs to evolve. Education being one of them.
yeah. Oh, we have another hand here. Oh, right here.
I think it would be nice to have guardrails around the training material for these models, especially now that we're evolving into focusing on multimodal models. Like, for example, I don't want Zuck to use my Instagram photos to train his models. It'll also be nice to have some transparency around how they're training their current models, like that interview with OpenAI CTO. It's like, have you used YouTube data to train your models? And she couldn't answer that.
You should probably assume, I would assume, that if they don't answer, that they are using it. Just quite frankly, the no answer is the answer. Anybody else? Oh, there's a gentleman here.
So I don't think it's a straightforward answer, right, is what you're getting at, because you can put guardrails on something, but in order to break through technology in certain spaces, you have to not have guardrails to get there first. I feel like even with ChatGPT, and such, they broke through and got there, and now they're figuring out, okay, how do we put guardrails around it, right? And does it make sense? So it's tough to say what's ethical and what's not. It's like, for example, do you have an AI engine somewhere that could detect a certain disease and go search for cures that has done something, but some might say, well, wait, that's unethical. I don't want my information out there, even if they've redacted some pieces of it. So it depends on which side of that coin someone looks at it from. So that's why I feel there's no straightforward answer on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it's just like this is the new privacy debate, right? People are very guarded about their online privacy until they're giving all their info to something that's providing them a useful service. And then they're very happy to click I agree and not read the terms and, like Netflix, Amazon, things like that. I think I saw a hand back there.
Yeah, so I wanted to sort of answer in the negative. I worry about implementation and just the long-term ability to reinforce, certain just regulations. I am also all for guardrails, common sense guardrails, but I think about like what has sort of led up to here, right? We've wanted for years for companies like Meta to just to enforce some sort of like common sense, safety practices with their ecosystem of products. And they've been able to essentially play this game of cat and mouse and really like outrun that. And I fear that tech's already sort of achieved escape velocity from, legislative reach. You look at the videos of, these Congress people who are just really asking these unsophisticated questions and these sort of gotcha moments. If they can't, if them and their teams of, aides and staffers can't effectively, even begin the conversation, how can we expect them reasonably to approach much less, provide this this long-term ongoing reinforcement of whatever regulations they come up with. So that's sort of my also not so straightforward perspective.
No, these are great comments. Oh, there's another one. And I fully agree, and these are all very pertinent to the discussion because it's all true. When you read the bill, for instance, in California, I also feel that the lawmakers don't have a full grasp of how this technology actually works. And so while the intent may be well-intended, I'm not sure that the law as it is right now is going to achieve even the effect that they have in mind. Because if you take into account, like, for instance, possibility of like rag poisoning, like in the internet, like you could, people can post all kinds of content on the web that the AI will, in its training or in its search, actually just automatically suck up and then really just then display it as a factual statement. And there are issues like that are out there that can't actually be regulated, even no matter how much safety testing you actually do, because how are you going to test on a second-by-second basis if some bad actor posts all these things on the internet, right? You can't almost catch up with that. So I think the law is well-intended, but the implementation is a little bit doubtful in my mind. I think we had somebody else, actually. Yes, sir.
So I think you have to distinguish between regulating the technology itself versus the application of the technology. Any technology, let's take fire as an example, you can't apply fire to burning your house down. That's illegal, right? But we don't outlaw fire, right? Andrew Ng is a big name in the AI space. He's kind of the grandfather of a lot of the AI technologies. He's of that mind. Let's regulate the uses of it. For example, keeping it out of election interference and those kind of things. But we don't want to kill the technology before it has a chance to fully develop. And there's a risk of that with regulations that are, focused too much on the technology and not enough on the misuse of it.
Yes, no, absolutely. These are all valid concerns.
We have another one right there.
And just as a follow-up to that same idea, seeing the AI as a tool. We've had tools, internet technology for, going back to fire, and remembering that, and that remembering that the tool and the use of the tool are two totally different things, and that we've been regulating human beings' use of tools for since we started hanging out in social groups. And that's a very hard thing for people to grasp, because I deal with this at home, I deal with this at work, I deal with this almost everywhere I go, where people imagine this worst case scenario apocalypse that you addressed at the beginning. And just remembering that on a variety of moral and ethical levels, it is a tool that that we're dealing with, and how we use that tool is totally separate.
Yeah, and it's a tool that has a tremendous power to, level the playing field, to give people access to things that they wouldn't have. I think the interesting thing, though, is, when we were hanging out in caves, you could tell if a tool had been used, and you can't always tell when one is used anymore. So that's what makes it more interesting or more nuanced. Were you going to say something, Nami?
Yeah, no, I think, the thing to keep in mind is that this bill, just, the pros and the cons, it actually impacts, because of the dollar amounts involved, right? Like the people impacted, it actually regulates like the largest players. So in some ways, I think it's OpenAI that's just like, raising the hand about like AGI, and then it looks like they're going to be one of the first people to get regulated now as a result of this, if this comes to pass, just because of the model sizes that it impacts. So it would most likely impact OpenAI, possibly Meta, potentially Google. So like really the frontier model makers. So having said all of that, I fully agree that it's very hard to implement. We have to really think about, the tool versus the use, the deployment, et cetera. But then having said that, there is some responsibility for like the largest frontier model makers to make sure that what they are putting out there is, meets within certain ethical guidelines. Again, I don't know if this bill is the answer, but there's it should be a little bit more nuanced than it probably is today. And yep.
So I don't know if everybody else is as skeptical as I am of the big players acting on their sort of ethical and moral standings, but I think it's in their business interest too for OpenAI and the rest to get the regulation conversation going early with lawmakers and try to educate them. Because if they spend hundreds of billions of dollars training the next model, and then that leads to some catastrophe that they get in with regulation, they put them out of business. So
Yeah.
Kind of along those lines, too, is it then fair for these large companies essentially to be the ones that dictate all of this and have control over how it can be used and how it can't, either through influencing the lawmakers or through, some sort of like self-regulatory scheme that they could impose instead?
I think it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, go ahead. Did you raise your hand? Oh, sorry. No, it's a double-edged sword, actually, because, yes, I mean, because they impact so much usage, right? So I always say OpenAI makes like a model that does 1 million things for like 1 billion people, probably, not even an overstatement. But because it impacts so many people and so much usage, there has to be some sort of self-regulation, and there has to be some sort of probably legislative regulation. But what that is, it's because everything is moving so quickly in the AI space. AI is like different every 2 weeks, I feel. Like there's some new technology, some new thing that comes out every 2 weeks. It's so hard for even us whose full-time jobs it is like to keep up with. So I think I find that very, very challenging, but go ahead.
Yeah, same. I mean, our company is 9 people. Our communication mechanism is like a signal group text. And every day, like I would say 50% of the texts are different tweets from different influencers in this space with updates and like new technology.
Another concern is that the bigger companies like OpenAI and others seem to be keen to have the regulations in place, it seems, as a barrier to smaller companies competing. I think the term is regulatory capture. And so, you know, they want the regulations, and then that just makes it difficult for the smaller companies.
Yeah, 100%, because those smaller companies might not have like a GC. They most likely don't. They might not have the resources to pay outside, like a really good outside counsel, the money they need to help them understand. So it might be easier to just not even try, right? Or pivot some other way and not engage.
Well, and then the backdrop of that is something, I mean, just something that I think about all the time, which is the use of small language models, which clearly fits outside the purview of this. So what we're working on and what is coming down the pike, and you will see more and more of this, are these, it's already out there, AI PCs. So everybody uses, not everybody, but a lot of people use Max right now to run these small language models. But the AI PCs, there's a first generation that came out earlier this year, and then more are being released this month, starting from this month. They have integrated GPUs within them that can allow the smaller language models, like up to 9 to 10 billion parameters, to run on your PCs with like 2 to 3 second inference speed, which is actually spectacular. So if anybody has tried to use like a 9 to 10 billion parameter model, like on their laptops, like even on a MacBook Pro M3 chip, you probably struggled a little bit with the inference speed. So in some ways, like there's the general use of these like large frontier models, and then on the enterprise side, or maybe even for the consumer side, like just as more time goes on, I feel like there's an opportunity with the technical development of the AI models converging with the hardware, so that we can actually distribute AI like on a much more personal level on your device, which kind of takes away almost this like argument, with like these humongous frontier models. So now I think more and more enterprises are adopting a hybrid approach, using smaller language models with the, combined with the large language models, because the small language models also allows for a lot more data privacy, security, safety, et cetera. That's just much more like talking about your data in your domain. So again, like in the whole context of AI shifting and AI being a very fluid technology that's advancing more rapidly than probably anything in human history, we have a lot of considerations to think about as well.
So pivoting a little from LLMs, and I know a lot of the work you do is with open source. What are your thoughts on the debate over, is it good to just, Elon Musk will just drop the open source code for something and make it available to everyone versus like gatekeeping it and not sharing it? On one hand, it allows many more people to develop technology, to work with it, to get ahead. But on the other hand, when it's misused, horrible things happen.
I mean, how many people have here like used open source for AI? Yeah, like practically everyone. I think that kind of speaks to how important open source is for development of AI, right? So we have an open source project, and we made the conscientious decision to go open source because we felt that, especially early on in AI, and it's probably still true today, unless you were willing to show your code, there was a lot of skepticism, disbelief, right? Lack of credibility. So we wanted to do that to show what we had, and also to be participants in the very rapidly developing AI community. And I think in some ways, it's like as soon as like OpenAI comes out with like some new model with this amazing capability, a few months later, there's open source, like all these amazing, incredible people in open source, like these geniuses from all over the world come together and they can replicate those results more or less. I think that's spectacularly amazing. Like I've never seen anything like this happen and converge so quickly. And that's really driven the rapid development of AI, by the way. So I'm a huge proponent of that. And the fact that most of the people here have used open source code tells me that, obviously you've all found it important and credible and useful to you as well.
Pivoting slightly, well, not slightly, this is a big one. This is something that's on my mind a lot because, a lot of us are working at startups. A lot of those AI startups are automating things which is going to mean that people are going to work more efficiently, or in some cases, a lot of what they do is going to be automated, and as a result, people are going to lose jobs. What duty, if any, do we owe those people that are going to be impacted? I think a lot of times we hide behind the messaging of like, we're just going to make people be more effective, or we're going to automate the rote, mundane tasks so that people can do more interesting work. But I think the fact is companies are going to be smaller and smaller. So what is going to happen, to those 40,000 employees of a company that now might not need more than 500 or 1,000? In the back. Oh.
Actually, I have a relevant statement to that. 2 years, so I'll say what happened first, and then I'll say what we do now. 2 years ago, so myself and my 5 employees, we were all laid off from our separate jobs because our bosses thought they could do our jobs with AI. In my case, I was the CMO for a mid-sized fintech. It got passed off to my employee. Eventually, he got fired, and his job got passed off to an intern. The marketing department failed. The CEO who fired me got fired himself. What we do now is we help make sure that stuff doesn't happen to anyone else. We teach employees how to use AI more effectively. So we work on an employee level to a larger scale, like enterprise level. That said, a majority of our clients who are the employees, their bosses don't know that they're using, like we have a few Googlers that are using our products when they're supposed to be using the internal LLM. We have the same thing for other clients as well. So that's an answer to that statement. It's like, to what extent is our responsibility? Let's assist them, let's empower them, let's give them the tools that they need to be the best that they can, to be more efficient, make more money. At the same time, we need to display hallucinations will happen. How do you know if a hallucination is bad? Do you have the expertise? Great. Your job is not going to be taken away. In the very initial run, yes, because people don't know. But now that people do, there should be a lot more job stability moving forward.
Yeah, wow, you have more. It's a popular topic. Love it. Yes.
Let's wait for the mic so the online people can hear
So
you.
I'm from the biotech pharma world, right? So two things, right? Jobs and the regulation. So before, I used to actually go to the library, find the papers and read the papers. Then you can search online. And now if I ask my team people, okay, we are doing some target ID, they just go to ChatGPT and it gives a lot of information. And that's great, but I like to have the transparency that how we did it, because then you understand what we missed or what we gained. And honestly, we do gain a lot. And in terms of what it provides is that it provides a lot of information in a short amount of time that needs to be reviewed. So we actually spend time more reviewing and understanding. So for us, it's great that there's a concise information that comes up, and in Perplexity, you can actually get where you got your the comments from or the research from. And if you look at in the science and biotech, right, when I was a student or when I was in my initial days, and even Genentech, etc., we loved going to the lab and actually doing the work to really, make it make our ideas prove, right? But when whole the AI computational people came, oh, we want jobs so we can work anywhere and get it done. But I'm like, you can only do so much. There is nothing is going to replace going to the lab and doing that experiment and proving that idea. So that mindset of students have changed such that because of AI, that they're forgetting the value of it. So I think the jobs may just transfer to, hey, going back and actually doing the research so your biotech can actually succeed. So, that's what I feel.
Yeah, and going back to that earlier comment, oh yes, over here too. Yeah, I think, the answers can be so general as to be almost like, and so watered down as to be like, it sounds really impressive. It's written in perfect English and like sounds amazing. But then when you actually look at it,
sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah, but when you look at it, it's like just generic. So it doesn't have that like specialist element in it. And then when you couple it with a lot of technology, when I create like a RAG workflow, retrieval augmented generation workflow, I always make sure that there's a citation element because given my legal background, like unless it shows me where it got it, like what page and what specific language, I don't trust it. So that's really how I recommend that everyone design their workflow, especially if you're using AI against your own documents. You need it to cite the sources because, yes, you're right, it just creates more work to fact check it because, adding anything, even if it's, not incorrect, if you still have to check to see that if it's true or not, like that's adding more work. So I fully agree. Yes.
I don't think that these companies that are using AI have any obligation to preserve jobs. I think we shouldn't be premature when it comes to getting rid of jobs, saying, "Oh, now I've got this great AI app, I can get rid of people." But I think technology, as designed, will eventually get rid of all the jobs. So, like a couple years ago, I was watching a movie where the antagonist was this AI creature, and he was criticizing the protagonists by saying, your problem is you want to save the world, but you don't want it to change. And as technology starts replacing a lot of the tasks that we spend our days doing, we're going to have to decide maybe as a culture we can decouple our daily survival from maybe that 9-to-5 job so that we can, focus on really driving technology forward and not trying to, when we started developing like gasoline, we were like, we've got to save the whale blubber jobs. We adapted. And I think if we are going to adapt technologically as it has gotten to the point where it is saving so much time and work that so many people do, if we want to continue that trend, I think we're going to need to decouple this whole idea of our jobs being the only way that we can maintain a life where we can interact with our neighbors in a way that isn't, filled with like shame or because I'm not employed or I've got a low-wage job, I don't know, just an idea.
Or to paraphrase, I think you're saying it's almost like a second industrial revolution and we need to adapt.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it doesn't happen if it happens in sort of a balanced way, that's the tough part, then ideally people will realize, right, like, okay, a huge part of my job is automated. Now I'm a specialist in automating this job. I can take that skill somewhere. And as that development happens, right, we start teaching kids in school now to not just focus on tech or not just focus on certain jobs, but maybe, different jobs become more attractive because they have to be done by a human. And those jobs can then pay more than they probably do right now because they'll be more in demand. Yep, right there.
I'm Carla Taylor. I'm a faculty member at Georgetown and a patent holder in the ed tech space. And, I really just think that this is a wonderful opportunity to take a step back for a company and look at their strategic plan and think, okay, how can we use AI to make our expand our goals and our strategic plan, so do more and do more quickly, and really have that be not just the C-suite people, but the entire team. Because it's like the Renaissance, and I think that's sort of what you were saying about the how the Renaissance really freed up people to do higher thinking and create long-lasting change and long-lasting things. And I really think that would be a helpful way to look at it.
Yeah. Oh, another. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's just, and as we mentioned, the technology is evolving all the time, every single day. Like, I almost get like whiplash from like trying to keep up with all this. So, it'll be really interesting to see how it looks a year from now versus even today, and how we're
6
like,
months
right?
from now.
6 months,
Yeah.
exactly. A year is probably a lifetime. Any other comments? Oh, I think we had one over here.
I got a comment while we're passing
sure.
that around. I just want to bring sort of a bigger outside perspective, not to say one side or the other, but I think that it is worth considering the greater risk of falling behind in the AI race. Certainly China, from a national security perspective and defense perspective, they are making huge strides. I think that it's worth understanding sort of the structural incentives. One of the gentlemen over there had brought up the issue of, I would call it almost this K-shaped, distribution where the rich get richer, and then we kind of snuff out the regulation or the innovation from more the smaller players that may develop these breakthrough technologies that sort of bubble up and help the wider landscape, right? So that's not to say, again, here or there. It's just more taking the larger picture into perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the point is it's happening with or without us. We live in a global world where just because we curtail some of the technologies, other players will. So it's happening, period. I think I see other hands over there too. Yes.
Yeah, so not to plug my company, I just want to use it as an example. So we're an AI company, but what we focus on are AI assistants. So these will work side by side with humans, and the goal is to amplify and accelerate what they can do. So a given individual will be able to accomplish more in a day than they previously did. I think it's important to reflect on history, like, for example, the agricultural revolution. Long time ago, I think 1800s or whatever, huge percentage of the workforce worked on farms, and it was manual work. When tractors and other agricultural automation emerged, there was a big backlash. People were saying, well, we're not going to have any jobs. But then there was an explosion of a variety of jobs that emerged because the automation freed people up to work on bigger and better things and different things. So we have jobs now that people would never have imagined back in the 1800s. So I think it's important to keep that perspective. I don't think, it will be true that we will probably need fewer people to accomplish a given task, but those other people will go on to do what humans are good at, which is human-to-human interaction, emotional things. Another perspective, I think, is that the LLMs, the AI, generative AIs, will give you answers, but you still need to take action on those answers. And that's where humans come in. We're the ones that act on that knowledge, that answer, and put it to work. So I don't think we need to panic. It's a difference now that white-collar jobs are we're questioning where are they going to go. That's something new. But I feel confident that we can amplify people's work so they can do more with less effort, be smarter, more data informed, but they'll still be the ones taking action and also relating to people at an emotional level. So there's a phrase years ago I remember hearing called blended AI, which is the combination of humans and AI. There's also another term, human in the loop. So you know, the AI will do certain things, but then it's ultimately the humans that make the final call on things. So I don't think we should throw our arms up and panic.
Yep.
I think some people probably still should, but overall, I agree. But go ahead.
I just wanted to add to the point of like considering AI as a way to like assist or amplify your work. Another perspective I read the other day was that now that a lot of us have sort of like AI tools at hand, so like think about your role, not only just, let's say like, even if you're in like a individual contributor role in an organization, now you have all these tools. It's almost like you have a team of assistants. So I think the other way to look at it is like, you know, even doing the same job, does it require the same set of skills? So for example, like how do I manage this quote unquote team? Like it might be, you know, different sets of skills that you would need if you didn't have like all these technologies available. And I think that also probably could mean something different for the organization when they think about like developing my talent, like what kind of competencies, like what kind of skills this new set of like workforce needs. So
I totally agree. I think about this a lot because, you know, as a junior attorney, my first year out of law school, I read NDAs. I was the NDA person, the trademark person, and you know, I wrote like simple contract amendments. And now, and that job was very important. That taught me drafting. It taught me so many other things. But now, like, you don't need that. You just, you know, upload the document into whatever tool you have. If it's, you know, obviously some require like going through them with a fine-tooth comb still, but that whole process is so much more sped up. Similarly, like, you know, when I was doing sales contracts for the sales team, I would fight them to death on like using customer paper because, you know, reading like Oracle's like 80-page contract and redlining it, that was like someone on my team would have to be basically not working on anything else for a day, for 2 days. And now you can throw that with your own template into an AI tool that compares them, and you can go through and it'll even like pop language in to like redline it. So suddenly that's a 2-hour job instead of a 16-hour job. So does your legal team need to be, can it be smaller? Maybe, but then how are those young lawyers that are just graduating, how are they gonna learn how to look for any of those things or how to do those things if we're solely relying on technology? I don't have an answer. These are just the things that kind of bubble through my head.
But the more macro concept that I'm hearing in the room, even from your example, is that perhaps maybe along with the regulators, in terms of enterprises or even like, let's say, law firms or companies, like, do they have a bigger almost responsibility and onus to look at the way their employees are using AI and to really almost set proper guardrails, guidelines, guidance on how to use AI. So is that happening right now? Because a lot of the use cases are within the workforce, what is and what isn't allowed, what's allowable, and are there clear guidelines that are being clearly communicated? First of all, set, like our company setting guidelines and keeping up with all the advances. And number two, are they clearly communicating that and providing enough like employee training and guidance and assistance with all of that? Because even more so than at like the state level, I think the first place actually where you're actually really touching this is within your, personally, yes, but then within your organization. So I feel like there's an organizational responsibility to actually have clearer guidelines, right?
I think, yeah, an organizational responsibility to understand it enough to write the guidelines. Right. What I've seen from friends who work in maybe more conservative industries where their GC or whomever doesn't have the time to research it, they just block it. And then, people go on their phone or they work from home and they just do it anyway. So I do think like really good nuanced training on like, if you need to write an email, use it. If you need to summarize something, use it. Don't put confidential information into it. Don't think you're gonna, get any sort of IP protection for anything that you make using it, things like that. But we can definitely everyone can be doing more on that front. No, please.
So this ethics question also involves energy. What is your take with the guardrails and everything, given the high energy cost of LLMs and stuff like that? Where does energy come into place into how we approach AI?
I mean, this is part of what fueled my work with small language models. So for instance, as I mentioned, the large frontier models are trained to do, basically like a million things for a billion people. But if you actually think about a lot of the tasks that we discussed today, this contract analysis, for instance, reviewing, let's say, biotech research, right? And asking it simple questions like RAG questions, you don't need a 1.4 trillion model to do that. With the right workflow, it can be done with a 7 billion parameter model or even less. The cost of energy to run that is obviously exponentially smaller than an OpenAI model. And so that's really what I work on a lot, is to educate companies and consumers about the energy cost of all this, and in terms of its energy, but actually even cost, in terms of how do you even deploy this, how do you run this, your data centers. So especially in an enterprise situation, you don't need it to do a million things. You actually have, I've never seen an enterprise come to me and go, I just need a model that does like everything in my company. It doesn't exist. I need it to come and do this for me. I need it to find this information, these types of information given this data set, or I need it to automate this reporting. It's very, very specific. If you have a specific need, it can be combined, it can be used using a combination of much smaller models that are 1 to 7 billion parameters in size, and that literally can be run basically on a laptop. Like, so even if you don't want to run it on a laptop, I mean, just if you translate that to the CPU consumption in a data center, it's all coming, it's possible. So I really highly encourage people to, even for us, just to keep up with the latest and greatest in AI, because a lot of the workflows that people they're almost like, there's no reason to use these, I had a customer say Cadillacs, because your workflow doesn't really require that. Okay. We have 15 minutes, so any
Yeah, what should we talk about? Questions, thoughts, what's on everyone's
feedback?
minds?
Yes.
A philosophical question. That that the AI or any technology for that matter is created to be a need or a want that we have, but then it creates new needs and new wants, which only it can meet in a different format, and it keeps existing. So it's really a cyclical relationship between our needs and wants and AI or any other technology for that, like the smartphone, for example. I mean, we didn't have anything, and then we had these little flip phones that didn't do anything, and then we had like a smartphone, and all it did was maybe take a picture, and then now, I mean, look at the iPhone. So anyway, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, it's an interesting question. I think part of it is just that's the nature of life and like humanity, is there's always going to be more. We're always going to, like, it's, sometimes I say we just kind of live in a made up world of BS, right? Because we just create these things, we create industries around them, we work at them, and like, what really like are they at the end of all of it?
I think you're talking about, basically the root of your question goes to, I can take it to like just technology, just, computers, just any, right? Any technology. And of course, technology serves multiple purposes, but for me, I think it's a drive towards efficiency. So efficiency means more time, like it's easier, it takes less time. So theoretically, it's all designed to make our lives easier, simpler, faster, easier, right? So long as these are things that we as human beings continue to want, something that is simpler, faster, okay, and cheaper and easier, I think people are gonna continue to develop more technology. But if you look at what is like the fueling emotion, like that keeps driving these technological advances, why do we keep doing this? Because honestly, if people didn't buy it or want it, people like me would stop making it. We wouldn't make it. If you'd be dead on arrival. Who would want this? Who would even care? But so long as people are interested in having these things in their lives, I think we just keep consuming it. So that's what keeps fueling it, I think.
And I also think it helps us refine our needs.
Yeah.
So, particularly with AI, there are new needs that emerge that we didn't know that we had, and then it helps us refine them more and more, and at the same time, we're expanding them also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a question here.
Thank you. So my name is Mark Zheng, and I just want to ask a question regarding when we think about ethic of AI, like what is really the ethic of AI? How many different aspects we are talking about? Because from the conversation, I hear about a lot about regarding job security and what if AI take our job, and what other aspect like the energy cost does. And whose ethic we're talking about, like a society ethic, a country's ethic, an individual ethic. So I just want to, when I go away, have kind of framework for thinker like you, like provide a perspective of what you are thinking about when we discuss this kind of ethic issue. So.
That's a great question. I think it's on all of those different levels, right? If you're the person that's making a technology that is maybe not intended to cause harm, but someone is using it to cause harm. Like an example would be, my parents are from Pakistan, so I follow some of the news over there, and I see people use AI to generate an image of a woman that is then, fake, but then she ends up getting honor killed because it was, she was in an unacceptable situation or whatever in the photo, right? So obviously the person doing the killing should have had an obligation to verify whether that image was true or not. Does the person or does the entity that created whatever was used to create that image have an obligation? And I don't think there's any answers. There's still questions, right? But how do we feel about it? What do we think? And then we're gonna watch it evolve.
Or is your question more like whose ethics, like what moral? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, I mean, in overall scheme of things is that I try to narrow down when we talk about ethic, right? What aspect really we are talking about. And then the next layer of question is that when you deal with a particular ethical issue is which stakeholder that we need to connect those issues. Now, in the example that you just discussed, right, and you talking about the person who created a photo, but what about actually the technology provider and what kind of responsibility that have? And it's going to be quite enormous if you can see all these different angles, So that's
exactly.
That's why we started the conversation by outlining the California law that regulates these large frontier model makers as technology providers and what are their duties and obligations legally under state law. But then I try to take it down to, well, those are the providers, and then on the user side, like on the corporate or enterprise organizational side, what are your obligations then to set boundaries and guidelines as consumers of that technology? But then Zarina actually just raised an interesting point. If you look at ethics, in the viewpoint of its ability to do harm, yeah. So if you look at, if you're a consumer of AI, then I guess we should look at it as, what are your obligations so that it's, to do no harm in some ways. And if you're a provider, then how do you make sure that you're doing your bit so that it doesn't cause harm? So I guess we talked about the potential for people to lose jobs as a result of this technology. What are our ethical obligations about that? So there are a lot of considerations, I guess.
As a human, as a employer, as a builder and inventor, all of those things, and many of us have multiple of those depending on the situation.
Yeah, and then even down to energy consumption. So if you, right? So somebody told me that, and I haven't fact checked this, but somebody very credible, that the amount of energy that it takes, just as an example, to produce like one picture on your GPT-4o is the same amount of energy that your cell phone uses to power up for a day, just that one image. Just heads up. Like, that's significant, folks. So, you know, do you as consumers and have like an ethical duty to keep that in mind if you care about energy use? So there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of perspectives around this.
So when you see those pictures where it's like, now make it more, now even more,
Watch
each
it.
one of those even more is a full day of a phone battery, basically.
Yeah. I guess.
There would be an automatic, you know, this was created by this technology that gets printed on that picture. You know, that regulation is necessary. So that's what I'm saying, transparency, that if any time that was used, it has to be mentioned. If they have used it and if something happens, then they are as much responsible as killing that person and should be hanged. So those laws has to be, like in Pakistan, it would be hanged. In India, it would be hanged if you do that to women. And there should be the reasons for it. So, you know, so it's as a company, they cannot track everyone around the world who is doing what. Can they embed in the technology that if you're doing so much innovation, why don't you have some innovation where you embed that this picture was created by this tech, right? How a painter, when it paints, there's a sign from the painter.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, that's definitely possible. It's just not being done because.
Yeah. So means if you made that compulsory for those organizations, then, you know, that way a government can regulate. There's always ways, I guess.
Yeah. I think I saw a couple of hands over, one over there, one over there.
I saw in the purple t-shirt.
Going on to her point, I have a comment that also it's not the we as users should also be, you know, very ethically using the technology, and it's not always on the company. So having said that, how do we define boundaries for users which are actually using the technology unethically, be it culturally, society, or, you know, just you know, even in schools or universities. So do you have any comments on that?
I mean, anything. Like, I have this pen. It could be used to do harm to people, right? So I think about any tool, I think it was mentioned earlier, any tool, if you have a bad intention, can be used to harm others. So to some extent, like, we have to look at the proximate cause, like we're sitting in the law school, so I'll talk about proximate cause. It's like the thing that really caused the harm and what caused it to happen. So I do think that there is definitely user responsibility. So if you, for instance, created that picture, if you told the AI to go create this horrible picture and then you went to use it, is it really the AI maker's fault? Or is it the person who actually asked it to do that and then started to disseminate it, right?
And likely the AI maker had like a EULA that someone clicked the box without reading and signed up that says that you cannot do
That's
that,
right.
right?
In violation of terms.
But is there a greater obligation to make sure they read it? Or, you know, like today we were signing up for E-Verify at work so we can check people's I-9s without doing it. And they make you take a quiz before they let you use it. So like even the government is making sure you can use this like seemingly, you know, just some higher level of just blindly clicking something that you're never going to read or adhere to.
Yeah.
Did I see a hand back there in the red?
A couple of hands. I love the participation.
Yes,
Thank
same.
you.
It's awesome.
We have a great crowd here.
I'm sorry, we have like 2 minutes left, so
yeah.
maybe we keep this the last question.
Hi. So I wanted to maybe make a comment and a question. It's a follow-up to what the gentleman was talking about. When we're talking about ethics in any society, like these are things we kind of absorb by the nature of living in the society. It's not things that it used to be taught explicitly in schools, but not so much anymore. And so, like, you know, you at one point used the example of do no harm, which is, you know, a utilitarian ethics, right? And in a country like the United States, where you have people coming from different societies, they may have, you know, a Muslim background, a Christian background, a Confucian background, Buddhist. They might be utilitarians, they might be existentialists, you know, all these things. That we're also, I think the general public is not really educated and equipped to be able to deal with. And the thing is like your ethics, it's not, the law can be informed by ethics, but ethics covers more than just the regulations and the law. It's, for example, legal to start an oil and gas company, and it's legal to start a sustainable energy company. And some people might say that one is the more ethical option of the two, but both are legal. And then there's also that gap between when regulations are actually made that sometimes people take advantage of. So for example, when there was, I think, with a big data set of books, I believe, copyrighted books, that were ingested by OpenAI, and they said they didn't use it. Some people said that there's evidence they did. I don't really know how that resolved itself. But basically, and I've heard stories, I'm not going to name companies, but I've heard stories of companies where they have used internal data of employees, and it was opt-out as opposed to opt-in. So it was already being ingested because there's a regulatory gap here. So the question is, and this is, I think, a broader question for everyone in this room, is what are the ethics of those who are building this technology? What is the framework they're using, guiding their decisions? And what is the framework that those who are regulating the technology, basically those who have kind of the levers of control of where this goes, what are their ethical frameworks? You know, what will move them and what won't? Because you might feel a certain way about technology and it should go in a certain direction, but until you know how those who can do something about it understand and think about it, like we're kind of, it's not, the conversation won't go anywhere in terms of practicality. So I just wanted to say that. And
Thank you. But I think everybody here, though, I think we're taking the right first step because we're thinking about it. Like we're actually talking about it. We're having an open discourse dialogue about it. So I think, you know, especially for a nascent technology like AI, I think this is a great and necessary first step. So, you know, I love the participation. Thank you. Like, thank you for coming out today to talk about this. And I had a fantastic time.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. This is really great.
Thank you so much. This was a great session, lots of engagement. Really loved you. Thank you so much. A quick info drop. You might have noticed Kevin Tai from 3 Circle Studio. He's a photography partner. He was photographing all of you all the time. And we have some cool AI facial recognition in place to tag you in all the photos that you were in. And you can scan this barcode right here on this table to download all the photos that you were particularly tagged in. And we also have a career fair today at 6 p.m. If you're interested, do sign up for that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.